This is Kristi. Before we get to today's episode, I want to give you an update about something we talked about in episode 20. That was when we talked to Sean McCabe about sabbatical and the importance of taking rest. I'm now back from my 1-month sabbatical. If you're interested in what I did and what I learned, go to flipyourscriptpodcast.com.
I surrounded myself with an amazing network of colleagues and outside folks and organizations that I found that became really trusted advisors and confidants, and they supported me 100% along the way.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
I say it at the end of every episode. You're capable of more than you think. Jody LaVoie's Flip Your Script story illustrates that in powerful and painful ways. Her husband, a successful founder and CEO, was working in his office in Chicago when he was shot by a high-level executive in his organization. The story made local and national headlines. So while Jody was dealing with the press, grieving as her husband was dying, and parenting their daughters, Jody took the reins and grew it. Wait until you hear the updates about her professional life and her personal life. Jody, welcome to Flip Your Script.
Thank you, Kristi. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's so interesting because I remember when this happened to your husband, and it was everywhere because it was so unexpected. And now, knowing that I was going to talk with you, I've gone back and watched some of the coverage, and I know that some of what was reported wasn't actually accurate, which happens in the middle of these kind of crises. And then I saw this one story where you have a friend talking to the press outside the door, and there's all this chaos, and you have kids, and your husband was fighting for his life. So when you think about that time, what stands out for you? Is it the phone call? Is it the big, what about that is the most, the moment, the memorable moment for you?
Obviously there are many, but I would say the phone call that I received, and even prior to that, the knock on my door. Our local police officer came and knocked on my door to really not deliver the news, but just to say, please call this number and to learn more. Your husband has been gravely injured. That's all I knew. And then the press called me on my cell phone. And so before I had even been told by anyone official, the press had told me. So, and that was all within a matter of 10 minutes, which is just crazy.
And Chicago press is known they're excellent. They're very good at what they do, and there's a lot of press there, which is excellent unless they're calling you and you don't have the answers, and it's the last thing you want to deal with is the press. And really, everyone who has some kind of crisis, a police officer should show up and a PR person should show up, because the last thing the family needs to deal with is all that press. But it makes sense that they have questions. So how did you navigate and balance that?
It was really one step at a time. So very quickly, I was ushered downtown to Northwestern Hospital, and my husband was in surgery. And they brought me to this conference room that was quite large, kind of a behind the scenes conference room. And I was assigned a nurse liaison. I didn't even know that existed, but she was really my go-to person that helped navigate the press want to quote, this doctor is doing this. What can I get for you? That was amazing. And two of my best friends joined me in that conference room right away. One of which was an English major at I went to University of Chicago, and she was from there. And I kind of penciled down what statement I had to make. The press wanted me to make a statement. I'd never made a statement before. And so I penciled down what I wanted to say. She helped edit it, and off it went.
And of all the days in your entire life you want to make a press statement, that's not the day.
No, it's not the day. It's certainly not the topic. But there were so many people hurting and wanting information, not just my family, but as you said, this touched people nationwide. The Chicago community was well aware of what was going on, my local community, the team at our business, everybody was affected. It was a really hard day.
Talk a little bit about the business and what it was comprised of, the kind of business that you all were in. Because I think when we think about workplace shooting, sometimes we think about post offices or manufacturing or people that are former employees that come back in with guns blazing. And that's a very different experience from what happened at your company.
That's absolutely true. So we were located in the heart of the Loop in Chicago, right on LaSalle and Jackson, on a big high-rise floor. And a company of about 65 employees, pretty much your standard office building. It was a company called ArrowStream, still exists today, absolutely, and is going very strong. ArrowStream is a supply chain technology business and a third-party logistics business. And I sold it to private equity in 2017. And most of the employees are still there today, and they're growing like gangbusters. So I'm very thankful for that.
So I want to backtrack before we talk about the business again and what you had to do at the business when you had to step back in a totally different kind of role. But as your husband is fighting for his life and all the medical things are happening, your community really stepped up for you in a beautiful way. Would you say that they were one of the main things that got you through?
You know what? Absolutely. And in fact, I always talk about what is one really positive takeaway is community, not only the community directly where I live, which really came out immediately to support. One of my good friends organized a red ribbon campaign, and every single tree in my town was tied with a red ribbon, including my mail carrier had her red ribbon on there. A gentleman that lived up the street from me, I learned he was in the construction business, and he happened to be doing work in the office building that we resided in for ArrowStream, and he sent his team up to resurrect what used to be my husband's office, so it wouldn't be a physical reminder for myself going back to the office and for all the other employees. And there's so many examples of that. Ladies in my neighborhood who planted my front planter for the fall to make it look beautiful, because I had no time for those kinds of things. It was crazy.
It's these little things. I think when people go through crisis and you're around them, first ring, second ring kind of friends, or even just someone you kind of know, it's always hard to know what to do. And to your point about what it was like to go through that, anything, the little things, the big things, it all helps because you don't have the capacity to do any of it.
Absolutely. And all of a sudden, coming from two parents parenting three girls, now to solo parenting and navigating that world and running a business and initially dealing with the medical care for my husband. It was a lot all of a sudden.
And your husband was shot by an employee who had just been demoted. And the reports that came out in the press were that the company was struggling, and that isn't true. The company was growing, but a different direction and needed to make some shifts. And this person, because I think the mental illness part of this is a pretty important piece as well. Like, this person wasn't someone who was, I'm using air quotes, crazy, wasn't someone who your husband suspected had problems, wasn't someone who anyone thought, okay, if this were to happen here, who would be involved? So again, I don't want to give a lot of time to this gentleman because he murdered your husband, which is horribly tragic. But it does show that the stereotypes of what mental illness is, looks like, sounds like, feels like, isn't what happened in your life.
That's absolutely true. This gentleman was somebody that'd been with the company for 10 plus years. We'd been to he and his wife's home for work-related barbecue at one point. And no, certainly he didn't present at all with any kind of troubleness that we could see. And it first started with this demotion. on a Monday with a conversation with my husband, which was very difficult. I mean, nobody likes to demote any kind of employee. And my husband came home that night, and he'd actually been preparing for it for a few weeks and kind of talking through how he was going to do this, and came home, this is really hard. I don't know how he's going to take it, but he's home, thinking through things with his wife. They continued to have conversations over the next couple days. And Wednesday, my husband came home. He's like, I think this is going to be okay. I think he's going to move into the new role and everything's going to be just fine. And then Thursday came a scheduled meeting with this gentleman in my husband's office, and he brought a gun that day. And he shot my husband twice, once in the head and once in the abdomen. And then he shot himself on the site and was pronounced dead at the scene.
And that day, many, many roles of your life shifted and changed forever. Your husband survived for 2 months and then died, and you had all of the personal things that were impacted. And you, not probably ever expecting to need to do it like this, stepped full force and took the helm of this company and did pretty impressive things with it. What was that like for you?
You know what? It's something that I never questioned. People are always like, well, how did you do that? I was just in autopilot mode, and that's what you do. And it really didn't dawn on me that, oh, by the way, the plan that Steve and I had was if something were to happen to him, I would take over running the business. It dawned on me the next day after I, talked with my children and gone through some significant surgeries with my husband. I went, oh no, or oh wow, I am running this business too. So now what am I going to do? So quickly, I put together a plan, and really all this happened within 6 hours of each other, because I thought, oh great, I'm going to have to hire a CEO. I don't have time to hire a CEO, like do an outside search. And the great news is we had such an amazing team at the business. I knew many of them. I knew the executive team. I knew all the employees for the most part, and they all stepped up to support everybody. So ended up promoting a gentleman from within to handle the day-to-day CEO related operations. And I assumed the chairman role, but a very, very active chairman role, because we were the largest shareholder in the business. And so not only am I running a business, our financial future as my family is on the line. Our friends and family had invested in the business. Some of their financial futures on the line. And of course, every single company employee and their families. So that was a lot riding on my back. And I don't think I really thought about it that way until post sale, because I was just sprinting every day.
You do what you have to do, and you don't even know you could until you have to.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
And what's so impressive about the conversations that you and Steve had before he died is that you talked about what would happen. You had a plan. Now no one ever expects that plan to ever need to actually be used, but so many people with estates and wills, they get to where they have to use it and there is no plan. So even though you didn't ever want that role or expect to take it, especially because your husband was young and healthy and doing really well, you at least had it in your head like, oh, right, I got to do this now within 6 hours.
Yes. Yes, I did. But that was really the extent of our plan, Kristi, was if something happens to me, you're in charge. And that was it. There were moments where I'm like, oh, honey, we needed a few more details to this plan. But quickly, I surrounded myself with an amazing network of colleagues and outside folks and organizations that I found that became really trusted advisors and confidants. And they supported me 100% along the way.
So there wasn't a file in his office. If something happens to me, this is what you should do. You really were flying kind of blind, but surrounded by really good people who were supporting you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the business certainly had their plan. So there was no change in the plan. We're going to continue following the plan. And so we did that, but no file, no letter, no outline. No, had to navigate that all on my own. And, frankly, I had been with the company at the beginning when it's all hands on deck when you start. Then I had taken 8 years off to stay home and raise my 3 daughters. And I came in, I didn't have a LinkedIn, period. I didn't have a bio. I didn't have a number of those things. So quickly, I had to get those put together. And I sought out some help and some resources to help me do that.
Do you have advice for yourself 20 years ago? Are there things that you wish you would have done differently, not in the days after the tragedy, but prior to that, to plan yourself, to put yourself in a different position to be able to do what you did? Or are you kind of glad you didn't know and you then could just like, I got to do what I got to do?
You know what? I was always raised, my mother always told us that you can do anything you set your mind to. And so I grew up with that mentality. And frankly, my husband would make fun of me sometimes. He's like, so you're telling me if you wanted to be an NBA player, you could do it. I'm like, of course I can. I'm not built tall for that, but I really truly believe that. And so, skill set wise, I felt spot on with what I had. And it was just really the mental state of course I'm going to do this because I'm not letting this fail at all. And I think there was a little bit of a big part of it where I felt like something had been taken from me, my husband, and I wasn't going to let anything else be taken from me or my family. And so I think that power and that energy helped really push things along as well for me.
The reality was it couldn't fail.
It couldn't. No. Well, and I never even thought about it failing because that wasn't an option. It's what are we going to do to move this forward? Failure was not an option.
I love that concept that what's it going to take to move it forward? That's a very different question from what if this fails?
Yeah, I never thought about it. No, I didn't want to focus on the negative. I'm always focusing on the positive, and I believe you can work your way out of pretty much everything.
And you had to. I mean, you had to with your daughters as well because they were struggling, grieving. Dad is gone. Mom's probably out of the house a little bit more now that she's taking this active role. This is now years later. How are they all doing?
Oh, thank you for asking, Kristi. They are doing amazing. You're right. It was quite a journey for this happened in 2014 for about 5 years, 4 to 5 years of just, different kinds of struggles that each of them had. But I'm just so happy to say I love seeing where they are now. My oldest just turned 21. She's a junior in college, thriving, smart, dedicated, great friend. My oldest is going to be on her way to college next year and is doing amazingly well at the school she's at. And my youngest is the only one left home with me. She's a sophomore and homeschooling, e-schooling upstairs, like so many of your listeners out there, I'm sure.
Everybody's home has turned into a school. We didn't even know we could do it. Well, that's really great to hear, Jody. And you sell the company and then it's still going, which is doing great in Chicago. And your career takes a different turn. And I just love what you're doing. Tell us about that. It's just so cool.
Yes, thank you. I love what I'm doing right now. So first, a lot of people ask, how did you come to decide to do what you're doing today? And it's interesting when you have your slate wiped clean and you have that opportunity to say, what do I really feel passionate about? Where do I want to move the needle in my life? And I spent some time doing that, just personal reflecting, some reading, working with a coach, and all that was really helpful. And it led me to this amazing nonprofit organization that was founded by 2 friends of mine, and they were in need and got to a point of growth where they needed a leader. It's called Female Strong, and it's here in Chicago, and we are all about supporting and growing confidence in middle school and high school girls so they can become our future leaders. And our flagship program is called the Young Entrepreneurs Academy, YAY for short, and girls learn to build a business start to finish within 24 weeks. And all the way to at the end, they present in front of an investor panel with a chance to win some startup funding and launch their business. Last year, we awarded $10,000 to all of the girls that participated. And what's most important is just seeing how these girls change with all of the programs that we do. They'll walk in shy, they'll walk in unsure. And then in the end, there are these powerhouses standing up in front of a big room of adults and have no problem projecting and communicating their message. It's amazing to see. And those skills that they gain is what's going to help propel them in the future to be our leaders.
Awesome. I love it. It's so important. And think of the lives and generational impact you can have with that. It's wonderful. Are there lessons that you learned living the tragic turn that your life took that has helped you give some lessons to those young women, some of whom perhaps have had some tragedy in their own lives?
There are. So first and foremost, find your support team and your tribe. Find that professional support group outside that's going to help you. Surround yourself with the right kind of friends and family that are going to help lift you up, because you need it. In the middle of this kind of situation, you need to be lifted up and supported from all angles. The other thing was, if you fall down, pick yourself up. There were certainly days that I fell down during that time, and failure was not an option. So pick yourself up by your bootstraps and keep on going. And then the last thing, and this makes me feel really proud, I think, of my relationship with Steve, is you never know what life is going to bring you. And Steve and our relationship was in an amazing place. And that gives me a smile and makes me feel really good, because we had nothing left unsaid between us. And because there certainly was never an opportunity for that goodbye moment or have some words with him, since he never regained consciousness. But that gives me plenty of peace.
All three important and powerful things. And what you said about your husband and the nothing left unsaid is so wise. And I don't know very many couples who live by that. And thank goodness for you did, because I think it's easy to not say some things, and then one little thing turns to the next little thing, turns to the next little thing. And then pretty soon there's a giant problem that has to be dealt with. And how different would your mindset be if you had this elephant in the room and he died and you never got to clear that up? That would weigh on you.
It absolutely would. So I feel very glad and grateful that was not the case with us.
So you've made this professional switch. You have done the hard work, therapy, the different things needed to heal. Your family's on a trajectory that is positive and that you're excited about. And your love life has, look at her. You can't see, I'm on a Zoom call, so I can see her smiling, people. And she is smiling like someone in love.
Yes. I am in love, and I'm happy to say that. But it took me a while to get to a place that I was ready to date again, or even think about that. And I really thought about, I guess, my dating process somewhat strategically, like one would a business, evaluate what is it I'm looking for, and navigate this whole online dating world, which was so new to me. And I got some outside support with a dating coach to help me, who was amazing. And I found Mark through Bumble, one of those online dating services. And it's been wonderful.
Good for you. When these things happen in communities, smaller communities, even though you're outside of Chicago, you had this smaller kind of, community around you. And you're the Steve's wife, or, the woman who lost her husband, and the kids so how did you get yourself out of that? Because what you've really done is you've redefined yourself. You've redefined your relationships, you've redefined your whole world has completely changed. And that was work you had to do, or else you could have had a victim mentality.
Absolutely. And I think I focused first and foremost on my girls. I was so busy doing work and frankly just making sure that they had the resources they needed. And that was the hardest thing for them because this was so public. And my oldest at the time was 15, just entering freshman year of high school. And that's a time where you really kind of want to be somewhat anonymous and not walk into a room and have everybody go, psst, psst, psst. And same thing, my other daughter was in middle school. And so I think for them, the loss of anonymity was the hardest. And they've found their place outside of the state of Illinois. And I have a daughter in college in Florida. I have one in school in New Hampshire. And I think for them, just kind of getting away so they can create who they are on their own without walking into the room and having that be a part of their story. And they can choose to share that part of the story when they're ready and with whom they're ready. For me, this is the town that I was born and raised in too, which was also never part of our plan to move back to the town we were raised. But when we founded the company, we decided to move closer to family for support. So fortunately, my parents and brother are all around here, and that's very helpful. It's now been 6 years since Steve's passing, and I'm in a much different place. He'll always be a part of me. This event will always be a part of me. This tragedy will always be a part of me, but I think about it much differently. So in front of our house, this is another one of those wonderful community stories. One of my daughter's classmates or class organized a tree. I live across from a park. So they donated a tree in Steve's honor, and there's a plaque on the tree, and it happens to be right across the street from my house. And maybe about 6 months after this happened with Steve, I walked out one night and somebody had put little twinkle lights on it. And so those were there for the longest time. And I loved that I would come home and I'd say, oh, there's the Steve tree. And it would just make me feel really good.
Because you put what happened as an event that happened to you, which is very different from letting it define you. And that's a big mindset change.
It really is. It really is. And that took some time, frankly, because at the beginning, you're processing so much. And there were many, many aspects with all of this, not only with my children and the business and legal things and tax things and all of these, ancillary things that you have to take care of. I had to reapply for a credit card, like with my own credit. I thought, really? So there's when you lose your spouse, there's just a lot of those kind of details that have to happen too.
When you look back on that time, what are you most proud of that you did right?
I'm proud of many things, but the top two that come to mind are my girls and where they are today. It took a lot, without getting into a lot of details, but it took a lot of doctors and outside support and different schools and a lot of things to help give them the tools that they needed to move forward with their life as well. And secondly, I'm really proud of the business. I'm proud of the team that was there and is there today. I'm proud of how they all jumped in and were right with me, not wanting the ship to go down. And it exists as an entity today, because sometimes when you sell a business, it's out of your hands when it's done. And that was really important to me when deciding who we were going to sell the business to. I wanted, as best we could, to have it be a continuing entity with the name that my husband chose for it. And it is, and that makes me really happy.
So when you drive down by that building, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you mixed emotions? What emotion do you have when you drive by that building?
There's a couple of different emotions. So first of all, the next week I had to go to work in that space and walk the same hallways my husband would walk and be on the same floor. And that was strange. That was very, very strange. Today, when I look at it and look down, LaSalle Drive down to Jackson, it's weird because I know over there is where the business was. Sometimes I can picture those news images that you saw, the street being roped off and police cars everywhere and ambulances everywhere. And quickly I try to, move that on out of my brain, because it's a lot to process.
Right. And your story to some degree was defined on how the news media portrayed it. And sadly for you, that wasn't entirely accurate. So I think that these stories can be so often remembered as this one moment in time. And the lovely thing about you sharing your story is that there's a forward progression. And the forward progression, yes, the event was tragic, but the life of all the people involved, it's not tragic. It's actually beautiful. This wasn't how it was supposed to work out for you when you thought that the day before this happened, and you wouldn't never have chosen it. But there is a happy ending is probably the wrong way to say it, but an ending that is happy, maybe.
There really is. And I look at the skills my girls have gained, the way they look at me as their mother, having stepped into this leadership role. It's very different than the way they looked at me prior to this. Not that there was, any badness or negativity between the two, but they certainly looked at me as a leader. And I like that, especially as a woman that's running an organization that's all about changing the destinies of our younger girls so that they can be leaders. And that's really important to me.
Because had the tragedy not happened, you probably wouldn't be in the role you're in now, making the impact.
I don't think so. On the good side, I was mentally ready and wanting to start going back into the workforce at the time that this happened, in a very different capacity, certainly. But yes.
Thank you for sharing your story. I want to wrap up with a question that I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. Was there a quote or some words that got you through the difficult days that helped you to flip your script?
Yes. So there's a couple things. So first of all, having 3 girls, these 2 songs that really resonated with me when I needed pick-me-ups are Brave by Sarah Bareilles and Roar by Katy Perry. Like, both of those came out during this time. And so I would jam those on the radio when I needed that little bit of oomph. And then the book that really resonates with me is Angela Duckworth's book, The Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Because that's what it took to do what I did in this event, but that's how I was raised as well.
And the nuggets of information that your parents planted in you and the relationships that you had built up prior to the 2014 shooting and the way that your husband had structured the people around him in the company are all the reasons that you are able to get through with the grit and the determination to build something and rise from the ashes. So when these tragic things happen, people so often just go back to their tribe, their community, and are so shocked by all these people that are coming out and all the support and the love they're getting. But really, you spent years doing really good work with relationships so that these people would come around you. And your husband built a company that could sustain something that would take most companies down. And that is something we can all learn from. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Kristi.
Some lovely things from Jody's story in the midst of tragedy to just cherish your community and to think about, what do you feel passionate about? Of course, this is not the way that Jody thought her life would go professionally or personally. But when she came back to the question of what do I feel passionate about, then the path became more clear as she was ready to move into her next chapter. And those 3 things she said, there is a lot of truth there. Find your tribe, take the next forward step, and protect and cherish your relationships. Never leave anything unsaid. My hope is that Jody's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.